Background music introduces a suspenseful, eerie tone. Halloween is a time filled with creepy and unsettling events. Story 1: The Suspicious House. Setting the scene. I remember being 15, going trick-or-treating with my cousin Jack. We had this strategy of visiting houses without decorations to avoid the crowds. The suspicious encounter. We knocked on a door, and an older man answered. Behind him we could see 5 younger men. The older man gave us candy, asked Jack's name, and we left quickly. As they were on their way home, they noticed a car pulling out of that same house's driveway. It slowed down next to them, and then a second car joined in, driven by one of the 5 men. They rushed home and immediately told their parents about what happened. Their parents reassured them, saying it was just a Halloween prank. But you know, the narrator couldn't shake off the feeling that it might have been something more sinister. Story 2: The Candy Thief and Michael Myers. So, it was Halloween night, and my friend Anthony and I, both 12 years old, decided to go trick-or-treating. We thought it would be fun to explore an old part of town, you know, the one our parents always warned us about. As we were walking, out of nowhere, a man jumped out from behind a church and tried to steal my candy. It was so sudden and honestly pretty terrifying. But then, Anthony, being the quick thinker he is, fought him off with his heavy candy bag. The man, probably not expecting that, ran away as fast as he could. Later that night, when we were back at home, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find a man in a Michael Myers costume just standing there. He didn't say a word, just stared into our living room. It felt like forever until my dad finally shut the door. It was one of the most unsettling moments of my life. The backyard intruder. At 1 a.m., they hear leaves crunching and see the man in costume on their backyard swing set, staring at the narrator's bedroom window. The man later appears in their house, prompting the narrator to call the police. Police search the area, but don't find him. Story 3: The Vendetta Masks. Setting the scene. Narrator is home alone on Halloween and leaves a candy bowl outside to avoid answering the door constantly. 2 men in vendetta masks showed up at the door, holding nearly empty candy bags. They asked if I was home alone, which made me really uneasy. Later, I heard rocks hitting my second-floor window. I turned off the lights and crawled to the kitchen to call 911. My neighbor Chris saw the masked men throwing objects at the house and called out to me. The masked men left before the police arrived. Reflecting on these creepy experiences, I realized how each incident has affected my feelings toward Halloween. So, just a bit of advice: always be cautious about Halloween safety. Halloween night brings not only costumes and candy, but sometimes a brush with the sinister and unknown. Imagine stepping out for innocent trick-or-treating, only to find yourself in situations that feel more like a horror movie than a neighborhood stroll. In the following stories, ordinary Halloween outings take unexpected, creepy turns, leaving a lingering fear that perhaps some Halloween scares aren't so innocent after all. Story 1: The Suspicious House. Setting the scene. On Halloween night a couple of years ago, I went trick-or-treating with my cousin Jack. We were both 15, a bit old for the whole candy collecting thing, but that year we decided it'd be fun to give it one last go. Instead of visiting the usual houses decked out with Halloween decorations, we targeted homes with lights on, but no long lines of trick-or-treaters. After hitting a few houses quickly, we came upon a plain-looking house. There were no decorations, just a porch light on, which made it seem like an easy stop for more candy. But the minute the door opened, we both felt something wasn't right. The Suspicious Encounter. A middle-aged man opened the door and stepped aside, revealing 5 other men inside the room, just standing there. All of them were silent, staring at us. They didn't seem to be dressed up, and for a moment, it felt like time froze. The older man, who must have been in his 50s, grabbed a handful of candy and dropped it into our bags. Then, with a strange smile, he asked Jack his name. Jack hesitated, then responded with a fake name and a quick thank you. As we backed away from the house, my mind raced, wondering who those men were and why they'd all been gathered in the front room of such an unremarkable house. Escalating suspicion. A few houses later, as we started making our way home, I glanced over my shoulder and noticed a car pulling out of that house's driveway. The car approached us, driving slowly, almost as if it was following us. I nudged Jack, and we both started to pick up our pace. Then, another car pulled up behind the first one, creeping along at our pace as well. I recognized the driver of the first car as the same older man who had given us candy, and in the second car was one of the men who had been standing in the background. My heart was racing, but we managed to make it home safely. When we told our parents, they tried to convince us it was probably just a Halloween prank. But to this day, I can't shake the feeling that those men had something far more sinister in mind. When I was 12, my friend Anthony and I decided to explore a part of town our parents had always warned us about. It was an older neighborhood with dimly lit streets, and we were excited to see what kind of candy the houses there might hand out. The first house we went to was surprisingly generous. A lady gave us each a big Hershey bar. Feeling pretty lucky, we moved to the next house, but we didn't get very far before things took a strange turn. Out of nowhere, a man came running toward us from behind a nearby church. At first, we thought he was just pulling a prank, and we stood there laughing. But when he reached us, he grabbed at my candy bag, trying to yank it out of my hands. Anthony, thinking fast, started swinging his own candy-filled bag at the man, hitting him with enough force to make him let go and stagger back. We thought that would be the end of it, but the man turned and disappeared down a dark street, leaving us shaken. Later that night, back at my house, the doorbell rang, and my dad went to answer it, thinking it was a late trick-or-treater. When he opened the door, there stood a man in a Michael Myers mask, silent and staring. He didn't say anything, and after a few uncomfortable moments, my dad handed him a piece of candy and closed the door. But before he did, Anthony and I noticed that the man's eyes were fixed on us. That blank, masked face, just staring into the house, made my skin crawl. Around 1 a.m, we were about to go to bed when we heard leaves rustling in the backyard. I peeked outside and was horrified to see the man in the Michael Myers costume sitting on our swing set, staring directly at my bedroom window. We quickly woke up my dad, who went outside to confront him, but he had already disappeared. I will never forget the feeling of being watched, even hours later, as we lay in bed, too scared to sleep. It was an encounter that has left me wary of Halloween ever since. When I was about 14, I decided to stay home alone on Halloween while my parents were out of town. After hours of handing out candy to trick-or-treaters, I got tired and left a bowl on the porch, hoping people would help themselves. I settled down to play a game, thinking I wouldn't be disturbed for the rest of the night. But then, around 10 p.m, the doorbell rang again. When I opened the door, 2 men in white vendetta masks stood there, holding small, nearly empty bags. The mysterious visitors. Neither of them said anything at first, just lifted their bags. I felt nervous, but I dropped a couple of pieces of candy in their bags. Then one of them asked in a low voice, "Are you home alone?" Startled, I quickly lied and said my parents were upstairs. They seemed to stare at me a bit longer before turning and walking away. I shut the door and tried to shrug it off, but their question left me unsettled. Escalating fear. About 30 minutes later, I heard something hit my bedroom window. My heart pounded as I turned off my computer screen and lamp, trying to keep out of sight. Another object struck the window, followed by aggressive pounding at the kitchen door. I crawled down the stairs to grab the phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. As I was talking to the operator, I heard a voice outside. It was my neighbor Chris, calling my name. I ran to let him in, and he explained that he'd seen the 2 men in vendetta masks throwing things at my house. Neighbor to the rescue. The police arrived and checked around the house, but the masked men had already left. Chris offered to let me stay with him for the night, and I gladly accepted. That Halloween changed the way I felt about the holiday entirely. It's not just the creepy costumes or haunted house stories that can get to you. Sometimes, the real horror is what lurks behind a mask, waiting for the right moment to scare you when you least expect it. Some Halloween scares go beyond jump scares and costumes. These experiences taught me that while Halloween may be fun and playful, it's still wise to stay cautious. Not everyone out there is just in it for the candy. Some people use the holiday as an opportunity to spread fear and confusion. This Halloween, keep an eye out for the strange and unexpected. You never know what might be lurking in the dark.